This video is about the fiscal year 2022 round of the Paul Brune Historic Revitalization Grant Program. This video will provide a brief overview of the Paul Brune program, the types of programs and applicants eligible to apply, grant amounts, timelines, and requirements, application requirements and process, and some tips and resources for preparing your application. The National Park Service is now accepting applications for the Paul Brune program through grants.gov using opportunity number P22AS00457. The deadline for application is February 7th, 2023. Funding for the Paul Brune Historic Revitalization Grant Program is provided by the Historic Preservation Fund. Established in 1976, the Historic Preservation Fund is the federal source of money for the preservation assistance grants to state and territorial historic preservation offices, tribal historic preservation offices, more than 2,000 local governments, and the competitive grant programs including Paul Brune, African American Civil Rights, Save America's Treasures, Historically Black Colleges and Universities, and others. The Historic Preservation Fund is funded by oil and gas lease revenues from the Outer Continental Shelf, not tax dollars. The Paul Brune Historic Revitalization Grant Program was established by Congress in 2018 and renamed in honor of Paul Brune in 2019. Mr. Brune was the longtime executive director of the Preservation Trust of Vermont and piloted a program similar to the current version of this program in Vermont in the 1990s. There are three distinctive attributes of the Paul Brune program. First, it is a subgrant program. There's an emphasis on economic revitalization through historic preservation, and it's targeted to rural communities. A subgrant program is one in which prime grantees apply for and receive a block grant from the National Park Service. The prime grantee then designs a competitive subgrant program to meet specific goals or target specific resource types. Then the prime grantee solicits applications from eligible applicants, reviews their submissions, and makes subgrant awards from that block grant to multiple smaller projects. Following award, the prime grantee then monitors these subgrant projects and provides payments to the recipients. Another distinctive attribute of the Paul Brune program is its emphasis on economic revitalization through historic preservation. Prime grantees distribute the block grant funds that they have received to smaller projects that support economic revitalization in their targeted communities. These are subgrants that can be awarded to privately owned resources as well as those owned by nonprofits and local governments, and could be for projects that include facade improvement or rehabilitation of historic theaters or community centers, any type of project that has a demonstrable economic revitalization impact on the community where it is located. The third attribute of the Paul Brune program that separates it from others offered by the National Park Service is its emphasis and targeting towards rural communities. That means that the subgrant projects must be located in communities that are defined as rural by the United States Census Bureau. For purposes of this program, that means communities that have a population of less than 50,000 according to the 2020 United States Census. Prime grantees may be more targeted and focus on specific neighborhoods, smaller population centers, or a cluster of counties in the design of their subgrant program. It will be up to the prime grantee who is applying for the block grant to define where they intend to focus their subgrant making activities. So for the prime grantees, eligible applicants may be state historic preservation offices, tribal historic preservation offices, certified local governments, or nonprofit organizations. The maximum grant award is $750,000, and while non-federal match is not required, it may be a competitive factor. Following the award of a subgrant program, prime grantees develop guidelines for selecting and distributing subgrants. Those guidelines will define what the target communities or geographic areas of the subgrant program will be, what types of resources might be eligible for subgrants, what types of applicants, what types of projects would be eligible for funding, how much the subgrant awards will be, and whether there are any matching requirements. Prime grantees are the ones who determine the parameters of the subgrant program. Eligible programs could be targeted to a single neighborhood or a commercial district within a city or town, or distributed to communities and buildings throughout a multi-county region or across an entire state. Maybe they will be targeted to Main Street designated communities in that region. The types of projects funded through subgrants are also up to the prime grantee. They may be focused simply on facade improvements in commercial corridors, or on the development of upper story housing in commercial districts. Maybe there's an emphasis on white elephant buildings or catalytic projects and specific types of buildings like theaters. It will be up to the prime grantee to communicate the broad parameters that the subgrant program will follow as part of their application. The subgrant programs being proposed by the prime grantee must be designed to address economic revitalization goals in their target communities. And properties receiving these subgrants must be located in rural communities of less than 50,000 people as of the 2020 census. Now, the definition of rural is relative. In some states, communities of 50,000 people will be considered major cities. In other states, they will be smaller population centers. Maybe there is a county-wide subgrant program proposed, and the selected projects will be in village centers that are 5 or 10,000 people, because that is considered rural in that location. It is up to the prime grantee to describe the emphasis and the geographies that will be eligible to apply for their subgrants as part of their application, the prime grantee's application to the National Park Service. One of the important aspects of a subgrant program is that the subgrant recipients must be competitively selected by this prime grantee following the award of the prime grant. That means that applications submitted to the National Park Service by prime grantees cannot be for single buildings or for pre-selected resources or projects. The subgrant projects must also be for properties that are listed and are eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. Resources that are National Register eligible at the time they are selected by the prime grantee must be listed in the National Register by the conclusion of the prime grant period. Costs for preparing National Register nominations are eligible grant costs. All the subgrant projects must meet the Secretary of the Interior's standards for archaeology and historic preservation. They must comply with Section 106, Section 110 and NEPA. There's a requirement that subgrant projects execute a preservation agreement or easement for the resource following the conclusion of the project. And again, there must be competitive selection and National Park Service approval of consultants and contractors working on subgrant projects. Eligible grant costs include subgrants for the construction activities, promotion of the subgrant program, technical or design assistance for subrecipients and prime grantee compliance activities, including Section 106, easement preparation and document recording, project signs, program management costs, including staffing costs for new or existing staff and contractors for the prime grantee, and prime grantee grant administration costs such as reporting, financial management, and other indirect costs. What types of projects are not eligible? Archaeological investigations beyond phase 2, reconnaissance surveys, reconstruction of resources that are entirely or substantially missing, new construction, property acquisition, collections, as well as work completed prior to the execution of a grant agreement. Here's some tips for putting together a competitive application for the Paul Byrne Historic Revitalization Grant Program. Be sure that the subgrant program you are proposing has a clear grasp and a relationship to economic revitalization goals. The most competitive applications are targeted geographically or by resource type to the types of areas and projects that are in most need and most relevant to the economic revitalization goals. Most competitive applications are associated with or supported by other planning activities in the community, region, or state. These could be comprehensive plans, economic revitalization plans, or local preservation plans that spell out the need for a subgrant program like the one being proposed. Most competitive applications will have some level of administrative capacity demonstrated, the ability to actually manage a subgrant program on the scale being proposed, and that the administrative costs, meaning those that are being charged for things like reporting and grant management, are limited to 5% of the grant award amount. Applications from prime grantees submitted to the National Park Service will be scored on 4 criteria, with each criteria being scored on a scale of 0 to 25 points for a total of 100 points. Criteria are: what are the subgrant program objectives, the need, urgency, and threat, feasibility, and sustainability. When you're preparing your application, make sure that you are registered in grants.gov, which is the government-wide system for submitting grant applications, and make sure that the individuals who will be preparing and submitting the application have the appropriate roles within that system to do so. Make sure you review and download the Notice of Funding Opportunity and all the related documents. You'll also need to be registered in SAM.gov, that stands for System for Award Management. Make sure that your organization's SAM.gov registration is current, as the renewal or registration process can take more than 2 weeks. Grants cannot be awarded or modified if the SAM registration for your organization is lapsed. So please make sure that that is current before you are submitting your application. You'll need to know your organization's unique entity identifier, your UEI. This is a combination of letters and numbers that is specific to your organization. This replaced the DUNS number in spring 2022 and can be found at the sam.gov website for your organization. It's important to know that both grants.gov and sam.gov are systems operated by other federal agencies, and so if you require technical assistance or help logging into either of these sites, you'll need to contact the help desk for assistance. National Park Service staff cannot access your profiles or your login information or provide any technical assistance accessing these two websites. So again, when you go to grants.gov for the opportunity number P22AS00457, which is the site for the 2022 round of the Paul Broun program, you will see the documents required for submission on the Related Documents tab. Make sure that you review all of the materials in this package and are familiar with the attachments and other documentation that is going to be required as part of your application. You must submit all of the items listed in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. Failure to submit these documents will result in your application being flagged as incomplete and will not be reviewed or considered for funding. Here's a list of all of the standard items required for a Historic Preservation Fund grant. There is the SF424, that is the Standard Form 424 series, which includes the application for federal financial assistance, budget information for non-construction programs, the assurance for non-construction programs, budget information for construction programs, and an assurance document for construction programs. There's also the SFLLL, which is a disclosure of lobbying activities, attachments form, the project abstract summary form, project description worksheet, budget justification worksheet, project images worksheet, indirect cost statement, and any letters of support or owner consent that may be applicable for your project. It's important to know that there are 5 individual documents within the SF424 series. There is the application cover sheet, the SF424A, which is the budget information for non-construction programs. This is required for all applications, including those that are primarily for construction. There is a line item on the SF424A for construction that should match the totals that you have itemized in the SF424C, which is the budget information for construction programs. You'll also need to provide the 424B and 424D, which are the insurance statements for the non-construction and construction programs. The SFLLL, the disclosure of lobbying activities, is also required even if your organization does not lobby. You would simply note that on the form and sign and submit it. The budget justification worksheet is a document where you will itemize all of the and categorize all of the costs you intend to incur as part of the grant project. There are 2 sets of columns that distinguish between admin costs and program costs. Admin costs are those expenses that are required to administer the grant. This might include time spent preparing reports or coordinating with the National Park Service, grant manager, contract management with your vendors, issuing payments, and the admin and indirect costs together may not exceed 25% of the grant award. As stated earlier, for the Paul Brune program, highest scores will be given to those who have admin costs that equal 5% of the grant award or less. Program costs include those costs that are required to achieve the purpose of the grant and the tasks in the statement of work. So these could include preparation of plans and specifications, construction management, the dollars given to sub-grant recipients for actual construction work, managing consultants or contractors, and other project-specific tasks. Any staff hired by the prime grantee to manage the sub-grant program, including preparing and soliciting applications from sub-grantees or communicating with sub-grantees, are also considered program costs. Indirect costs are those costs that cannot be directly attributed to the grant but are required to execute the grant. Some common examples include utilities or payroll expenses incurred by the prime grantee. These are calculated as a percentage of the eligible costs, and in this case, that would include the personnel and consultant costs, as well as the first $25,000 of each of the subgrants. Eligible costs are often determined as part of the budget negotiation following the award. Indirect costs are calculated by applying a percentage multiplier against the eligible direct costs. That indirect cost rate is determined in one of three ways. It can be negotiated with another federal agency if your organization is a frequent recipient of federal assistance. It could be negotiated directly with the Department of the Interior. Or if you don't have a negotiated indirect cost rate with any federal agency, you could elect to apply the de minimis 10% rate against the modified total direct costs of salary, fringe benefits, contractual costs, and the first $25,000 of subawards. You would provide a statement on organizational letterhead indicating which of the rate options you would intend to apply for this grant. The organization may also elect not to claim any direct costs and apply all of the money to direct expenses, because indirect costs also come out of the grant budget. So they would need to be included in the budget justification worksheet and cannot exceed the total grant award that is being made. The project description worksheet is the primary narrative document where you will describe what you're proposing to do and why it should be selected for funding. Note that in the notice of funding opportunity, you will find a section on the criteria that include a series of prompts and more detailed questions that your narrative should respond to. Make sure that you are responding in your narrative to all of these prompts and providing all of the requested information. Be clear and concise in your narrative. Be specific with the tasks that you are intending to perform. Make sure that the narrative and the budget worksheet relate to each other. And make sure that you're familiar with the compliance process, the Section 106, Section 110 NEPA requirements for these projects, and have factored that into your timeline and budget requirements. Pictures are always helpful, but only if they're relevant. Again, for the Paul Brune program, you cannot pre-select resources or properties that will receive subgrants, but providing illustrative photos that show the communities where subgrants might be awarded, or the types of conditions or resources that could be eligible are very helpful in understanding the intent of your subgrant program. Any letters of support you intend to provide must be submitted as attachments with the application in grants.gov, and they should be relevant, meaning that they should communicate any involvement or commitment that partners or other entities working with you might be willing to provide for your project. Make sure that you're familiar with the procurement requirements, including the competitive selection and pre-approval process. And include in the narrative on the project description worksheet how you intend to meet the easement requirement, who will hold the easements, include money for easement preparation if necessary, and make sure that you are clear in understanding what that requirement means. Some advice for our applicants include making sure you give yourself plenty of time to prepare the documentation, gather all of the materials you need before logging into grants.gov to submit that application. It's always a good idea to ask someone who is unfamiliar with your program or project to read your application to be clear make sure that it is clear and responsive to the information requested of you. And expect the unexpected, including glitches and system outages that could delay or inhibit your ability to submit, especially if you are working down to the wire and the last possible minute of before deadlines. Make sure that you have given yourself enough time in anticipation of those unexpected outages. There are resources available on the National Park Service website for including checklists as well as frequently asked questions about the Paul Brune and other programs that we fund through the Historic Preservation Fund. And in the Manage Grants section of that website, you will find more information about easements, the regulatory compliance process, and any of the forms and other documentation required after a grant is awarded. So one last reminder that applications for the fiscal year 2022 round of the Paul Brune Historic Revitalization Grant Program are now being accepted. These applications must be submitted through grants.gov, and you will find the application materials available on grants.gov for this program under opportunity number P22AS00457. And the deadline for submission is 11:59 p.m. on February the 7th, 2023. Questions about this program can be sent to the following email address or they're available at the National Park Service website. That email address is stlpg@nps.gov. The website is go.nps.gov/revitalization. Thank you on behalf of the Cultural Resources, Partnerships, and Science Directorate, State, Tribal, Local Plans and Grants Division of the National Park Service. We look forward to receiving your application.